Did you know that Old Town Square in Fort Collins hasn't always been Old Town Square? In fact, Old Town hasn't even always been Old Town. Back in the day, it was just downtown Fort Collins. I spoke with Lori Jusak of Fort Collins Tours, and she let us in on some of the history of the area.
Yeah, it was Linden Street, and they just kind of decided they would make that into a walking area rather than have a street going through there.
In the 1970s, Old Town was not a happening place the way it is today. Then the Foothills Mall was built, and that spelled even more trouble for many of the downtown businesses.
Of course, when you have a covered mall come in, especially in the 70s and 80s, when those covered malls were the place, that certainly took away from Old Town and probably killed a lot of the retailers. There were some retailers who started in the 70s and 80s and restaurants who said, we are just staying and we're going to make this a nice place. And they really are the founders of Old Town. Bassetti's, the cupboard, have been there forever and had faith and put the work and the time into it.
Bassetti's and the cupboard are still there today. Here's Robert Bassetti on the beginning of their family's restaurant.
My dad and mom opened it in January of 1979.
And what was Old Town like in those early days?
You know, Old Town was a lot different. I mean, really, there was no Old Town. It was just downtown Fort Collins. Lots of empty storefronts. Of course, Old Town Fort Collins, which is kind of where the square is, was not in existence. That was a street.
So what, nobody called it Old Town back then?
No. That's kind of something that started to take place after the renovations were done at Old Town Square, which is what that became once they took the street out, put the plaza in. That became Old Town Square.
Right.
Prior to that, everything was just downtown Fort Collins, and it was sleepy. I think is probably the best word. In fact, when I have new managers at the restaurant, it's real interesting because we'll go outside on a Monday or a Tuesday night, and there's cars parked everywhere. There's hardly any parking, and I just kind of laugh, and they'll say, "What are you laughing at?" And I'll say, because in 1980, 81, 82, you could come out there on a Monday night, and there would be 5 or 6 cars in front of Bassetti's, 5 or 6 cars in front of the Catacombs, and there was nobody parked in the middle of the street. Then there was nobody parked left or right. That was it. All the stores had closed down, and the only people that were down there were eating in the restaurants, but there weren't that many restaurants to eat at. So it's really humorous to go out there now and see it packed, every night of the week. And I mean, it's a wonderful problem to have, but it didn't exist 20 years ago, for sure.
Old Town is now a very safe place, but it was a little rougher around the edges back then.
I know that area was not a good area to hang out. The hotels there, Northern Hotel and Linden, were pretty much abandoned, and there were squatters living in them, and they would actually start fires in the hotels to stay warm, and there were several fire problems there. So it wasn't until the 80s that somebody said, wow, we can really bring this area back and make it nice.
Todd Dangerfield is with the Downtown Development Authority, the body that is handling the newest improvements to Old Town Square, and he tells a story of how the kiosk building in Old Town Square near the stage and the big spruce tree to the east of it weren't just there for foliage and for a functioning building.
Yes, 30 years ago, the story is the kiosk was put in its place along with the spruce tree at the end. There was walnut to mask the blight of North Linden, because in the late 70s, early 80s, that wasn't looking so swell down there. So now it looks great.
It does look great. It looks amazing now.
Yeah, we're trying to create this view corridor now where you could stand in the middle of the square right in front of Ben & Jerry's and see all the way down Linden Street.
1985, they decided to make the end of Linden Street into a pedestrian area. Did it work right away? Did it take a while to pick up steam? What was it like in the early days of Old Town Square?
No, that took a while to take off. The guy who did all that work, Gene Mitchell, was a real visionary guy. Unfortunately, he ended up selling it because it didn't work for him. Of course, Brian Sukup bought Old Town Square, and when he bought it, that's when it really took off. Now, mind you, during that time, there wasn't, there was a population base on the south of town, but there weren't as many amenities as there are down there now, like on Harmony Road, for instance.
Yeah.
So really, the entertainment district was Old Town Fort Collins and downtown Fort Collins. Really, I think Old Town really has become what it's become because of the population growth And because as things grow and as the newness of Fort Collins continues to expand east and southeast, Old Town looks that much more desirable because it's very boutique-y, if you will.
Boutique-y, unique, popular, growing, thriving. What some visionaries saw in the early 80s has probably outpaced their expectations. I'm Paul Wozniak. I want to thank Lori Jusak from Fort Collins Tours, Robert Presetti of Bassetti's Restaurant, Todd Dangerfield of the Downtown Development Authority for their contributions and time, and Katie Schneider of Visit Fort Collins for helping me come up with such ideas. Thanks for watching and listening, and please subscribe to our channel.